because we're in an era of trade-offs, there are a lot of ideas about what should and shouldn't be done. And I'll just quickly mention some of those. Some of these are more controversial than others. It's too bad that education is not something that in the end will be making huge increases against. In fact, if we're not careful, there's sort of a natural design of the way that government spending works, that more and more of it would be spent on pensions and medical, and less of it would be spent on education, research, and infrastructure. And if you compare, to oversimplify that, call that spending on the older versus on the younger, that ratio would shift dramatically and be very different than a number of the countries we compete with, where they, you could say, are abnormally focused on those elements that are investments in the young, and not, particularly on the medical side, which is the very big numbers and the trends are very much for huge growth. We are unique, both at the state and federal level in that. So here under the do category, I've got what I think is the top priority, which is getting the measurement of teacher effectiveness. That alone, if it was done well, would make us the best in the world. There are others who do some of it. We're not the most aggressive on that, but we have other factors in our favor, so if we combined and did this well, it'd be big. Having more effective teachers teaching a larger class, by which I mean a class size that's gone from, saying, 20 to 26. That's a dramatic change. That's a 30% increase. If you gave a third of that to the teacher for taking on a tougher challenge, and you made sure that the people you were retaining to teach those somewhat larger classes were the more effective teachers, you would have a budget saving, you'd have the teacher making more money, and you'd have better student outcomes. And so although class sizes, as they get into certain numbers, say above 30, that's clearly detrimental. Within the range that people have been investing, if you look at all the different trade-offs, that's one that may not be appropriate that it's synchro-synced as you look at all the different things going on. In the college area, everybody should have a sense of which of the colleges, both community and four-year institutions, are doing very well, and even break that down by the departments. It's actually very interesting when you take higher ed and think of it in that way. The amount of subsidization is not that well correlated to the areas that actually create jobs in the state, that create income for the state. Now, in the past, it felt fine to just say, okay, we're overall going to be generous to this sector, but in this era, to break down and really say, what are the categories that help fill jobs and drive that state economy in the future, you'll find that it's not across the board in terms of everything that the state subsidizes in higher education. And then finally, the point about technology. I do think that there's a lot of experimentation that should go on. Even in tough budget times, foundations like ourselves can be helpful on this, but the state will have to keep involved and have people who are trying out ways of using technology. It is not ready for prime time in the sense that you can make a dramatic cut and just by putting technology in immediately be able to retain the same output. In the don't category, at least one state actually reduced the length of the school year. The United States has one of the shortest school years already, so that seems like going in the wrong direction. We also have one of the shortest school days in the world, and that's partly work rule related, but it is very different. I do wonder in terms of committed dollars into the degree pay and longevity pay, if there's some way to retain flexibility so that as the effectiveness pay issues come along, it's clear that funding teachers to be in different categories and to have some incentive element that there's money that's available for that. And finally, in terms of college enrollments, there are some colleges that can actually fund on the margin that the tuition revenue, some of which is from the students, some of which is from the federal programs, that actually can fund that incremental student. So actually absolute limits in some ways work against the scale economics that, particularly for the strong institutions, are very important. In higher ed, what you'd really like to see is that the student enrollments of your effective institutions would go up and the student enrollments of your less effective institutions would go down. And in order to make that dynamic work, you have to have room for expansion in the more effective institutions.